Don't know why it was being such a poop. So I just bypassed it and connected to my phone.
Hotspot?
Hotspot.
Oh, nice.
And you don't see that one? I'll go to another one. There you go. So we did. Hi, folks online. It'll be no surprise to anyone that my computer was being mean to me. But I'm more clever than it. I shouldn't say things like that because it'll hear me and then it'll be angry at me.
Our brains are more powerful computers.
Yes, they are. All right, so today our plant is, and I have some from the garden out there, Yarrow. So there's Yarrow. Yarrow's a great plant to work with because it's so abundant. It grows circumglobal. You'll find Yarrow everywhere. There's many different species. The official species is the white flowered form generally here. Sometimes it'll go pink, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But this is the Yarrow that we're working with. So here's some tea for you. And so Yarrow is the common name, or one of the common names. Botanical name, Achillea milfolium. Achillea milfolium, 1,000-leaved. And if you look, here you can take one of the flowers to look at while we're talking. So if you look at the leaf structure, you'll see that it's divided into very fine little leaflets, right? So it's deeply, deeply, deeply toothed. So that is a single leaf, but there's thousands of leaflets, so hence the species name milfolium. So Achillea, and then the family is the Asteraceae, and I need a new pen. The Asteraceae family. So this is the daisy family. This is the sunflower family. And you can sort of see that. Folks online, I'll try to show you this. You can sort of see that in the structure of the leaves, right? You have those outer, what are called the ray petals on the outside. If you look at an inflorescence, one of the single flowers is actually a collection of many smaller flowers. Hence the older name, the former name was compositae, because these flowers are a composite of many smaller flowers. So you take the smallest flower that you can look at, and each one of those little petals, individual petals, is a flower. That's a ray flower on the outside, the larger petals, and then that little inflorescence in the center. Each one of those is little flowers. So dozens of little flowers in one flower head. So that is one of the characteristics of the Compositae or Asteraceae family flowers. So yarrow. Now there is another plant called yarrow that is native to California. It's golden yarrow or woolly yarrow. In fact, the botanical name is Eriophyllum. Eriophyllum, something beginning with C, and I don't remember. But Eriophyllum is our native, one of our native yarrows. This is a native yarrow, but we also have a more common one, is the yellow woolly-leaved. That's what Eriophyllum means, woolly-leaved. So woolly-leaved and yellow flowers. When we're talking about yarrow medicinally, we're not talking about that one. That has similar chemistry, similar botany. It's a cousin of it. But whenever we are talking about yarrow and its medicinal qualities, we are always talking about the white flowered one. Likewise, it's such a beautiful flower, and it grows so well and so readily that many different cultivars have been created. Cultivars are are plants that have been selected for growth habits. And so since it does tend to throw a lot of colors, you can get orange colored and burgundy colored and rose colored and yellow colored. The flower will just present with a lot of different colors with these hybrids. If that's what you have growing in your garden, then you can use that medicinally. However, we always want to remember that when we are cultivating, when we're selecting for characteristics in a plant that are different from how the plant grows in the wild, right? We're selecting for a plant that makes orange blossoms because we really like orange blossoms. So every time a plant grows with a kind of a unique orange or even a yellow tendency, the grower will select that plant and continue to cultivate it and try to get it to grow more orange and orange and orange. And so the focus in the plant is the production of carotenoids generally and flavonoids in the foliage, so that it'll be orange. There's going to be changes in the chemistry of the plant, of course, because we're selecting for orange. So there's a change in the chemistry of plant as there's more carotenoids or flavonoids or whatever the pigment is in there. And that's a benefit. The downside is there may be other changes in chemistry that you don't catch because you're not looking for that. So changes in other parts of the plant may mean that the effect that you get from a different plant may not be where you're seeking. It might be, we don't know because the chemistry has changed and we don't know how. So it's just something to be aware of. If you have an option for getting the white flowered form, then get that. The white flowered form, when it's stressed, will turn kind of pinkish. And you see pinkish colored in like high mountain wild yarrow or seaside yarrow where it's been stressed, because plants, when they're stressed, tend to produce high amounts of anthocyanins, which are the red pigments in plants. Those are the red pigment in berries and roses and raspberries and elderberries and all of those. So there's going to be a light pink blush to plants that are wild. It's this same strain, just the plant has been stressed a little bit. And some people believe that wild pink yarrow is one of the strongest types of yarrow that you can find, because stress to a plant growing in a wild setting is going to cause it to create more therapeutic compounds, right? Than a plant that is cosseted and protected and grown in a garden, given everything that it needs and lots of compost and water and, and just babied along. There's not going to be a lot of chemistry. We don't know. There may be less chemistry in that plant because of that coddling. It's just something to be mindful of. That being said, if you just kind of don't coddle your garden plants, you can have garden plants that are medicinal and stress them a little bit, just a little bit, make them stronger. So this is cultivated yarrow, because we don't sell many wildcrafted plants in the apothecary. So this is cultivated yarrow. I believe it's from Oshala Farms. And so we can see it's a beautiful golden color. This is a combination of the leaf and the flower. So the leaf and the flower together dried is what we use generally, what I prefer to use. There's a little bit of difference in chemistry, and we'll talk about that. So what do you think about the fragrance? Do you smell much?
It smells sweet.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would think honeysuckle almost.
Yeah. There's definitely a floral quality to it. Honeysuckle, you can sort of smell a little bit of its relationship to chamomile.
Yeah.
Right?
I think chamomile, when I'm smelling it, I smell chamomile.
Exactly. Yeah. It has, and we're going to play also with the essential oils, so we can see the aromatics, the volatile oils in yarrow. There is a lot of overlap with chamomile, and so yeah, we expect it to smell chamomile-like. Okay, so yeah, and we know then also that steam is therapeutic. It's carrying those volatile compounds that we're smelling. So the flavor then is also somewhat chamomile-y, right? It's floral. There's more bitterness than chamomile. This one is pretty nice. But generally, yarrow is going to be like chamomile if you brew it very, very strongly. That actually speaks a lot to some of the similar chemistry. So like very strong chamomile. It has that floral quality, the aromatic quality. You can also start to feel a little bit of dryness, some tightening in the oral tissue, right? Because a lot of the chemistry of yarrow is the chemistry of the flavonoids, the tannins, things that astringe and tighten and firm tissues. So we can feel that in our mouth, the presence of tannins and other flavonoid chemistry, tannins and flavonoid chemistry. And so when we feel tannins, when we feel that effect, we know that there's going to be stabilizing of tissues, right? Making tissues stronger, healthier, more elastic. We may not know exactly which tissues until we know which flavonoids are in there, but we know, we can feel in our mouth that there is an astringent, a tonifying effect. And so we're going to feel that tonifying effect definitely all throughout the gastrointestinal tract, right? We can assume that that astringent, tightening, firming effect, which would help with bleeding, right? It would help with tissues that are inflamed and hot and irritated and reactive, because it's calming and cooling and tightening those down, just like we feel in our mouth. It's tightening those down when it comes in direct contact. So any kind of gastrointestinal irritation, inflammation, bleeding, from everything from oral care, right? Yarrow is very, very good for gum sponginess, bleeding, sore gums, esophageal, gastrointestinal, all through the colon. So anytime we have tissues that aren't strong and healthy, we can use yarrow in the gastrointestinal tract and also topically. So what we see in the gastrointestinal tract, it's important to remember the gut lining is skin, right? That is technically the outside of our body, right? So all through the gastrointestinal tract, we're like a weirdly shaped donut, right? And so once plants get into our body, as they move from the intestinal tract into the bloodstream, and then they circulate, we can have a systemic effect. But as it comes in contact with the tissues, it has a localized effect. And that localized effect is strongly tonifying, strengthening, and anti-inflammatory and soothing because of the flavonoids, and also because a lot of the chemistry of those essential oils, right? So what it does in the gastrointestinal tract, it also does on the skin. So yarrow has a long history of use as a first aid plant. This is really one of its best known actions, is generally as a first aid plant. We use yarrow when there are wounds to be dealt with. And again, we can kind of feel that, right? So yarrow has a lot of tannins, and it has a lot of volatile oils, and those volatile oils are also strongly anti-inflammatory. And we can actually see one of those. One of the things in the yarrow essential oil, you can sort of see when you look at it that it has a bluish tint, right? So yarrow is, in essential oil parlance, it's called one of the blue oils. And you can really smell that chamomile family resemblance there.
Is chamomile tannic like that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. If you make it strong. Yeah. If you make it strong and therapeutic, it definitely is. So yarrow essential oil has a compound in it that under distillation, when it's sent through a still to be distilled from the plant to make the essential oil, it produces a compound called camageline. Camageline is a blue pigmented compound. It is an artifact of the distillation process. So plants that have high amounts of these specific compounds upon distillation turn blue. They're not blue. There's no blue pigmentation anywhere in the plant. It's just this specific chemical, when it goes through the heat and the conversion of distillation, turns that lovely deep blue color. Now, if you look at German chamomile, it'll be an even deeper blue color because the German chamomile has a very high amount of chamagiline in it, but yarrow does too. So chamagiline is a marker for anti-inflammatory compounds. All of the blue essential oils are going to have significant effects on reducing inflammatory pathways when used topically on the skin and also systemically throughout the body. So yarrow infused into oil or made as a tea, or the essential oil diluted and added to formulas is going to be very, very helpful for inflammatory reactive skin disorders. One of the primary ones being eczema. But any kind of long-term rash, any kind of long-term or even short-term red, hot, inflamed, irritated tissue state where the skin has forgotten how to be a barrier, right? The skin is supposed to be an effective barrier between the inside and outside, and sometimes the skin forgets how to do that. And so yarrow is very good for helping to remember that. And that we see that pattern of yarrow strengthening structures throughout the body, and it kind of leads to one of the other ways that we use yarrow and other ways to think of yarrow, which is that yarrow keeps blood in its channels. So blood is supposed to be in specific channels, right? The blood stays in the blood vessels, right? And the blood vessels throughout the body. When those blood vessels are weak, we have blood vessels that leak or break and cause bruising, right? Pooling of blood in the underlying tissues. And if that doesn't resolve very quickly, if we have people who have long-term bruises that don't resolve, blood vessels that tend to break very, very easily, nosebleeds, spider veins, varicose veins, all of these conditions where the blood wants to move out of its channels where it's supposed to be. This also applies to uterine bleeding. So the blood in its channels is also blood in the uterus when we have uterine bleeding when we're not supposed to, or particularly heavy uterine bleeding. Yarrow is also one of the primary plants we use for that as well. So yarrow keeps blood in its channels, and so it improves blood flow throughout the body. It normalizes and equals and regulates blood flow in the body, but it also stabilizes and strengthens blood vessel walls, and it stops bleeding. So when it's applied topically, blood is blood out, bleeding, a wound is blood outside of its channels, and yarrow doesn't like that. So it's stopping, it's astringing and tightening the wound, stopping the bleeding, keeping the blood back in the channels, and stimulating healing of those tissues.
How about blood clots?
So it does not cause clotting, and this is one of the things, since people tend to think that because it heals the wounds on the skin, that it is going to cause increased clotting in the bloodstream. And we don't see that. That's not healthy blood flow. Healthy blood flow is blood moving in the body, not blood sludgy and forming clots. And it doesn't stop them. There are many other plants that do. Ginger and garlic are two of the strongest ones, right? The highly green plants do have a higher amount of vitamin K. You see vitamin K in deep green leafy plants. And so eating deep green leafy plants can improve clotting because vitamin K is a factor in clotting. So if you have someone who has problems clotting, that's something that you can look into, is that. And there are other plants with that. So it does help with clotting externally and topically. It does not increase clotting in the bloodstream and the blood flow, because that's not healthy blood flow. So that makes it unique, right? It makes it's different depending on where it is in the body. So speaking of the uterus, yarrow has an affinity for the uterus, for helping to strengthen and tonify and regulate uterine function. So it is often used as a general uterine tonic. It is my go-to when I have someone who has heavy uterine bleeding. Yarrow is always going to be one of the first plants that I go to in large amounts on the way to their caregiver to find out what is going on, right? We don't just kind of have someone with very heavy uterine bleeding and go, well, here, just take some yarrow and that's about it. We do want to give them complete care, and that means find out what's going on. If you have uterine bleeding that's not supposed to be there, that's a big red flag. But on the way to the ER or your doctor, wherever, you can do yarrow in a tincture or a tea. One of the keys to that is you want to drink a lot of it. So you would be drinking like a quart of yarrow tea on the way to the ER. We're not drinking a cup of yarrow tea. We're not taking a dropper full of yarrow tincture. You're taking a dropper full of yarrow tincture every 15 minutes, or a teaspoon of yarrow tincture, every hour. We're taking large amounts of it, but it's very, very beneficial for that, for stopping uterine bleeding. The first aid effects of yarrow have long been recognized. In fact, it may be one of the plants that has the longest history of use in Western herbalism, because in Iran, there's an area in Iran called the what was called the Shanidar region, and there are caves in there. And in those caves, they found graves of Neanderthal people who were buried in ceremony. And one of the people who was buried in ceremony there was a Neanderthal person, aged. They seemed to be old, and they were surrounded by medicinal plants. They were able to identify the pollen of medicinal plants around them. And so one of the medicinal plants, this is 70,000 years ago. So 70,000 years ago, in a pre-Homo sapiens species, there's evidence that yarrow was one of 7 medicinal plants that was buried with this. What may be, we don't know, right? There's no way that we can know, but it seems like the story there may be that this was a medicine person, a person who knew the healing effects of plants, or the people who buried them knew the healing qualities of plants, because all of the plants that were buried with them were healing plants. So possibly 70,000 years of medicinal use. We get the name Achillea. The name Achillea, the genus name, comes from Greek mythology. So there's 2 stories around yarrow that tell us kind of that history of use. Both come from Greek mythology. One of them is that on the eve of battle, Achilles was visited by Chiron, who is a demigod, the deity who gave information on healing, one of the deities who gave information on healing to humans. And so he visited Achilles and said, you're going into battle with your soldiers. Your soldiers are going to be wounded and you're going to need something to help heal them. And so he gave Achilles the knowledge of using yarrow for healing on the battlefield. We have a lot of traditional stories and mythology and traditional usage of yarrow used in the battlefield. That's a very strong association. The other story is that when Achilles was born, his mother was told that he would die in battle. And the way to protect him was that she should take him as an infant and dip him into a vat of yarrow tea. And if she dipped him into yarrow, then the yarrow would protect him. It would give him it would protect him. And so she took her baby by the heel, right, and dipped him into a vat of yarrow tea. And so everywhere that the yarrow covered him was protected. But because she was holding onto his heel, it left his heel exposed. And later on, when he went into battle, he was injured by an arrow hitting him in his heel, in his Achilles heel, the one place where he was unprotected, and he was killed in battle. So 2 stories, but both of them kind of speak to the reason why the plant is called Achillea milfolium. Let's see, what else? Oh, the essential oil chemistry. So the essential oil chemistry of the chemagiline. We have also a compound called bisabolol, alpha bisabolol, which is another very strong anti-inflammatory and pain reliever. There's also some levels of a compound called beta caryophyllene. I think I spelled that correctly. So alpha bisabolol, beta caryophyllene. The beta caryophyllene is one of the terpenoid compounds that's found in cannabis, which lends cannabis some of its pain relieving qualities. So some of the pain relieving qualities are associated with that. And we see beta caryophyllene in very high amounts in many plants that are used for pain relieving. Again, speaking to Yarrow's use as a first aid plant for general wound care and healing. So strongly antimicrobial, anti-inflammatory, tissue healing. It is a pretty amazing plant. The stems of yarrow tend to grow pretty straight. This one is a little bit bendy, but you can sort of see its tendency to grow very, very straight. And the straight stems of yarrow in Chinese tradition were collected, the longest and straightest of them would be collected and dried and used for divination, to throw the I Ching. So the I Ching is a divinatory practice of throwing 6 straws onto the ground and seeing how they lay. And there's associations of the patterns with divinatory practices. I am not a practitioner of the I Ching, so I'm not going to speak any more about it than that. But there's, on the internet, you can find information on the I Ching. But yarrow stalks were traditionally used for that. One of my students, for her independent study project in school, made a set of I Ching stalks from yarrow. So she grew the yarrow and selected the straightest stalks and dried them and cut them to the same lengths and made a beautiful set of I Ching stalks. So it's said that the longer the stalks were, the more they would be given to higher class people, so that the emperor would have 6-foot-long yarrow stalks. And there are species of yarrow in China that grow very, very tall like that. Now, yarrow is also used in a lot of divinatory practices all throughout the world. So we see that practice, that association of yarrow with kind of passing over the veil with gaining different types of information quite a lot. We also see the use of yarrow as a protective influence, as an agent that protects us from pernicious influences in many Western magical practices. Even in that story of Achilles being dipped into yarrow to give that protective mechanism. And we see that the chemistry of yarrow is chemistry of protection and barriers, right? Appropriate barriers, protection, sealing open areas. So magically, we can use yarrow if that interests you and how to work with the plant. We can use yarrow whenever we need to kind of improve boundaries around us. If we are a person who has problems with boundaries, we grow yarrow in front of the apothecary there, so that it's sort of it's a boundary. It's we're here and we're hanging out here, and we have a little barrier of yarrow. And if you have ill intention towards us, you can just like walk on by and don't even look at us. So so you can do that with yarrow. Also, many people like to carry yarrow in a purse or make a spray. Use the Yarrow essential oil as a anointing oil or a spray just to give that protective effects. Let's see. So the bitterness and the aromatics of yarrow also help to improve digestion, right? So all bitter plants, irrespective of why they are bitter, all of the bitter chemistry of plants stimulates secretion of digestive enzymes, improves digestive functioning, and the aromatic compounds in yarrow are very helpful for relieving gas and spasm, irritability, and reactivity of the gut. So yarrow is also very commonly used for general gastrointestinal health. If you make yarrow into a hot tea and you drink a large amount of it, like a quart of this, you may have more if you like. If you drink a large amount of it, hot, remember we were talking last week that cold teas tend to keep things towards the core of the body, and hot teas tend to disperse them outward, right? That's a basic concept that you can use to direct your teas. So if we drink yarrow tea as a cold tea, it's generally going to stay more and work on the digestive functionings. If we drink yarrow as a hot tea, it opens up the channels in the periphery of the body, making you sweat. This is another one of its traditional uses, is as what's called a diaphoretic. Diaphoresis is sweating. So a diaphoretic is a plant that induces sweating. And you'll feel that. And this leads to one of the other common uses of yarrow, which is for colds and flu, particularly colds and flu where there is a fever or just a feeling of trapped heat. Anytime there's a feeling of trapped heat in the body that can't get out, hot yarrow tea, it opens up that periphery up, it opens up those channels and allows the body to radiate heat outward, which is what it's supposed to do. This is particularly beneficial if you see someone who has a fever, right? Someone's got they've got, say, the flu, they have a fever, but their skin is not red, they're not sweating. Right? So their temperature is like 102 degrees. Their face should be red. They should be sweating. They should be releasing that heat outward. So when we see that discrepancy between heat kind of stuck in the core and not showing up in the periphery, we can use yarrow to radiate that heat outward. It's different than if someone has a fever. One of the more conventional ways to treat it is to take an ibuprofen, right? An NSAID, take a drug to relieve the fever, to lower the fever down. We absolutely don't want to do that. When we're dealing with a fever, it's very important to let the fever do its job. Fever is a mechanism that the body has for making the organism a hostile environment to pernicious influences coming in. So when we have a virus in our body, viruses can generally only live in a very narrow range of temperature. So our body mounts a fever in order to drive off the virus. It's a very effective way of driving off viruses as long as we allow our body to do what it does. If we're constantly going, oh, temperature is 102 degrees, I don't want a temperature, temperatures are dangerous, and we constantly take ibuprofen to drop the temperature down, our body has put an incredible amount of energy into mounting that heat fever, into bringing that temperature up, and you've just dropped it down. Not only have you wasted all of that expenditure of energy, but you've also now created a better environment for that virus to proliferate. The virus is like, yeah, thank you very much. And so we can actually see an increase in viral proliferation. A better thing to do is take something like yarrow, a diaphoretic plant, to help to move that heat outward. If the heat of the fever is really uncomfortable, help to move that heat outward, but it's not dropping the body's ability to mount the fever, right? So there's a difference there. So one of the primary, a very old cold and flu tea, standard cold and flu tea is yarrow with elderflower, and generally mint is put in with that, sometimes lemon balm, especially if you're dealing with a young child. Yarrow and elderflower and lemon balm is a classic. It tastes really nice. It's mild, it's safe even for younger children, and it's really effective for helping to cool down an overheated body. Let's see. Doopa-doopa-doo. Yarrow, the essential oil of yarrow and alcohol extracts of yarrow have been in some studies found to be as effective as DEET as a insect repellent. And so you can make a tincture of yarrow. You do want those aromatic compounds. The aromatic compounds are the things that make yarrow so beneficial as an insect repellent. So you can make a tincture of yarrow. You want the yarrow that you buy to have a high amount of flowers in them. You want, because the flowers are where the aromatics are, right? So you would want to check the yarrow that you're buying, make sure that there's a lot of flower heads in there, and then make a tincture out of that using about 60% alcohol. Will help to extract those aromatics into an alcohol base. And you can just put that into a spray bottle and spray it on you, and you have yarrow tincture as a natural insect repellent. That also can be very helpful if you do get an insect bite, because of that astringent, anti-inflammatory, tissue healing, antimicrobial effect that yarrow has. It's going to be held in the tincture, right? So yarrow tincture can be sprayed on, and then it can also just be dropped on if you do get a bite. Yarrow tincture is also very good for, any type of first aid condition that you happen to have is likely to be well treated by yarrow tincture, either applied topically or taken internally. So it's something that should be in your medicine cabinet, definitely. Let's see. Allergies, cautions, and contraindications. It is a member of the Asteraceae family, and some people are allergic to that family, right? Because some people are allergic to everything. So you want to be mindful of that. It's not a really common allergy, but it does definitely happen. So it is potential. Bitter plants can alter the uptake of medications because it changes digestive capacity, right? It improves digestion and it changes bowel transit time. So taking bitter herbs with medications may alter the blood levels of your medications. It's a good idea to, if you're taking something, if you make like a really strong yarrow tea, so it's more bitter even than this, that you would want to separate it from any medications that you're taking by couple of hours. Generally 2 hours is a good length of time to make sure that the digestive system is emptied, just so that there's nothing that happens there. On the other hand, if you're taking nutrients or other herbs that you want to enhance the digestion, or if you have poor digestion and you want to improve your digestion of your food coming in or anything coming in, you can use yarrow about 10 to 15 minutes before eating, before taking your supplements or taking your herbs, and it can gently increase the absorption and utilization of those plants just because it's improving digestive capacity. So it's a nice balance there. Let's see. So that is about it. Any questions about yarrow? Anyone? It is a really easy plant to grow in the garden. Everyone should grow yarrow because it is so easy to grow. It sends out little runners, underground runners. It'll send out roots underground, and then another plant will pop up, and then it'll send out and it'll pop up some more. You can see that actually in practice out in front of the shop at our yarrow, especially out in front where it's been doused by the rains. There's a lot of little babies that are popping up kind of all over around it, because that's how it spreads. That's the most effective way of propagating yarrow, of getting more yarrow. You can grow it from seed. They're tiny little seeds. You can direct sow them into the ground. But it's just so easy to find yarrow growing and then just reach underground. Those underground runners are roots. So you can reach underground and snip some off and just pull out a whole plant that's no longer attached to the parent plant, and pop that into a pot, and you have a yarrow plant. But everyone should grow it. It grows well in a pot. It grows well in the soil. It will spread and grow, and you'll have a nice bed if you take care of it. It does need a pretty significant amount of water. Once it's established, it can do a little bit less, but it will always be happier if it has more water. So that is yarrow. I love it. It's something that everyone should have in their medicine cabinet. It makes medicine in whatever way you use it. So you can make it into an infused oil and use it as a wound care salve or balm. Or you can make it into massage oils or creams or lotions, anything that has an oil in it. Yarrow infused oil is going to be really beneficial, again, for healing the tissues, for fighting infection, for stopping bleeding, for all of those first aid practices. You can use it as a tea. You can use it as a fresh plant if you find it growing. You can take the leaves and crush them up and make them into a fresh plant poultice and apply it directly topically to the skin. It is very, very effective as a fresh plant poultice. Another reason why it's really nice to have it around. And it dries. I mean, it's just a beautiful little flower. So you can just dry it hanging upside down, and then it'll just dry as a lovely flower. And so it's beautiful as well as therapeutic. So there's yarrow. I don't remember what our plant is for next week. I don't, but it's in the Facebook list, and I will post it in the discussion for this video, and I'll get y'all a copy. So I'll see you next week for next week's mystery plant. For the mystery plant. All right, bye-bye.
I know, when we get there.
That's right.